Welcome to Real Life Stories, where we bring you authentic family dramas that touch the heart and remind us of the power of love, forgiveness, and second chances. Today's story comes from Bob, a 67-year-old retiree from Tucson, Arizona, whose quiet life was completely transformed when his 22-year-old son Tyler arrived at his doorstep at 6 a.m. with nothing but a suitcase and a determination to rebuild their relationship. This is a story about family conflict, personal growth, and the courage it takes to choose love over resentment. It's about second chances, the healing power of honest communication, and how sometimes our greatest challenges become our most precious gifts. If you enjoy real stories about real families overcoming real challenges, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. We share new inspiring family stories every week, and your subscription helps us continue bringing these important stories to light. Share this video with someone who might need to hear about the power of forgiveness and family healing. Now, let's dive into Bob's incredible journey of reconnecting with his son and rebuilding a broken family. The first light of dawn was just beginning to creep through the blinds of Bob Henderson's one-bedroom apartment in Tucson, Arizona. At 67, Bob had grown accustomed to the quiet solitude of his retirement life. The coffee maker gurgled to life at exactly 5:45 a.m., same as every morning for the past 3 years since the divorce. The sound of a key turning in his front door lock froze him mid-sip. Bob's weathered hands trembled slightly as he set down his world's greatest grandpa mug, a relic from better times. Only 2 people had keys to his place, his landlord and his ex-wife, Patricia. The door swung open, and there stood his 22-year-old son, Tyler, dragging a large black suitcase behind him. Tyler's usually neat brown hair was disheveled, his college sweatshirt wrinkled, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Dad," Tyler's voice cracked slightly, "can I come in?" Bob's heart clenched. In the 3 years since the divorce, Tyler had visited maybe 4 times, always awkward, always brief. "Of course, son. What's going on? It's 6 in the morning." Tyler wheeled his suitcase into the small living room, parking it next to Bob's well-worn recliner. The apartment suddenly felt even smaller with another person in it. Tyler turned to face his father, his jaw set with determination that reminded Bob painfully of Patricia. "I'm not leaving, Dad. Mom said this place is mine too." Bob's coffee mug slipped from his fingers, shattering against the tile floor. The brown liquid spread across the kitchen like spilled truth. "What do you mean, son?" Tyler's shoulders sagged. "She kicked me out, Dad, last night. Said I'm old enough to figure things out on my own." His voice grew bitter. "But she also said that since you owe her alimony, and this apartment is technically part of your assets, I have every right to be here." The morning air conditioning hummed to life, a mechanical sound that filled the heavy silence. Bob stared at his son, this young man who looked so much like himself at that age, but with Patricia's stubborn chin and fierce green eyes. "Tyler, sit down. Let me get you some coffee." Bob's voice was gentler now, the initial shock giving way to concern. "Tell me what happened." As Tyler sank onto the couch that doubled as Bob's bed on nights when his back acted up, the older man noticed the way his son's hands shook slightly. Whatever had happened wasn't just a simple family argument. "She found out about the money, Dad." Tyler's words came out in a rush. "The college fund you've been secretly contributing to. She thinks you're trying to buy my loyalty or something." Bob's blood ran cold. He'd been working weekends at the hardware store, sending small amounts to Tyler's college account without telling Patricia. It wasn't much, $50, sometimes $100 when he could manage it. He'd wanted to help without causing more drama. How did she find out? Bank statement got mixed up with some other mail. She opened it thinking it was hers. Tyler looked up at his father with eyes full of exhaustion. "She lost it, Dad. Completely lost it. Started screaming about how you're trying to manipulate me, how you abandoned us, but now want to play the hero." The sun was fully up now, streaming through the blinds and highlighting the dust motes that danced in the air between father and son. Bob's apartment, which had felt like a refuge for 3 years, suddenly felt like a battleground where he never wanted to fight. And then what happened? Tyler's laugh was hollow. "She gave me an ultimatum. Stop accepting your help and cut you out completely, or get out of her house." He gestured toward his suitcase. I couldn't do it, Dad. I couldn't pretend you don't exist just because she's still angry. Bob felt something tight in his chest loosen for the first time in years. His son had chosen him, at least partially, but the weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders like a heavy blanket. His small apartment, his fixed income, his careful routine, everything was about to change. Tyler, you know I want you here, but I'll get a job, Dad. I'll help with rent and groceries. I'm not here to be a burden. Tyler's voice strengthened. I need somewhere to land while I figure things out. And honestly, I think I need to get to know my dad again. Outside, Tucson was coming to life. The sound of garbage trucks rumbled down the street, and Mrs. Garcia from next door was already watering her small patio garden. Bob looked at his son, really looked at him, and saw not just Patricia's hurt and anger reflected back, but also hope. Okay, Bob said simply, we'll figure it out. Tyler's relief was visible, his shoulders dropping as tension he'd been carrying for hours finally released. Thank you, Dad. I promise I won't. None of that, Bob interrupted. You're my son. This is your home now, too, whatever your mother says about property rights. He managed a small smile. Though we might need to get you an air mattress, that couch isn't going to work long term. For the first time since walking through the door, Tyler smiled back. It was tentative, fragile, but real. I'd like that. As Bob bent to clean up the broken coffee mug, he wondered if Patricia had any idea what she'd just given him. His son was home. 3 days later, the small apartment had transformed from Bob's quiet bachelor pad into something resembling organized chaos. Tyler's air mattress occupied most of the living room floor, his textbooks stacked on the coffee table next to Bob's collection of Louis L'Amour westerns. The refrigerator, once containing only the essentials for one person, now bulged with groceries they'd shopped for together at the local Safeway. Bob discovered that his son was an early riser just like him. They'd developed an unspoken morning routine. Bob made coffee while Tyler showered, then they'd sit at the small kitchen table, sharing sections of the Arizona Daily Star and discussing everything except the elephant in the room, Patricia. Any luck with job applications? Bob asked, folding back the sports section to check the Diamondbacks' latest losing streak. Tyler looked up from his laptop, where he'd been typing cover letters for the past hour. A few bites. There's a position at Best Buy that might work around my class schedule, and the campus bookstore is hiring for the fall semester. Bob nodded approvingly. Tyler was a junior at the University of Arizona, majoring in business management, a practical choice that made Bob proud, even if Patricia had wanted him to study something more prestigious. What about that internship program you mentioned? Still waiting to hear back. Tyler closed his laptop and stretched. Dad, can I ask you something? Shoot. Why didn't you fight harder? For custody, I mean, when you and Mom divorced. The question Bob had been dreading finally arrived. He set down his coffee and studied his son's face. Tyler deserved honesty, even if it hurt. Your mother is a good mom, Tyler. Better than I was a husband toward the end. Bob's voice was measured, careful. You were 19, almost an adult. The courts generally don't award custody of adult children anyway. And honestly, I thought it would be easier on you if there wasn't a big fight. Easier on me or easier on you? The directness of the question caught Bob off guard. This was Patricia talking. She'd always been able to cut straight to the heart of things with uncomfortable precision. Maybe both, Bob admitted. I was tired of fighting, son. Your mother and we'd been fighting for years. About money, about my drinking, about my job, about everything. I didn't want you caught in the middle of another war. Tyler was quiet for a long moment, processing. Outside, the morning heat was already building, even though it wasn't yet 8 a.m. August in Tucson was relentless. Were you really drinking that much? Another hard question. Bob had been sober for 2 years now, attending AA meetings at the community center twice a week. Tyler didn't know about the meetings, and Bob wasn't sure if he was ready to share that part of his recovery yet. Yeah, I was. Too much for too long. Bob met his son's eyes. Your mother had every right to be angry about that. She had every right to protect you from it. But you stopped. I stopped. Why? Bob smiled ruefully. Because losing my family wasn't rock bottom for me, apparently. But losing my job and ending up in this tiny apartment, eating TV dinners alone every night, that got my attention. Tyler reached across the small table and squeezed his father's hand. The gesture was so unexpected, so generous, that Bob felt tears prick his eyes. "I'm proud of you for stopping, Dad. I'm proud of you for a lot of things, son, including having the guts to walk away from your mother's ultimatum." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the air conditioning cycling on to fight the rising desert heat. Then Tyler's phone buzzed with a text message. Tyler glanced at the screen and his expression darkened. "It's Mom. What does she say?" Tyler showed him the message. "Have you come to your senses yet? Your father is using you to hurt me. Don't be his pawn." Bob felt familiar anger rise in his chest, the same anger that had fueled too many fights, too many nights at the bar. But he'd learned some things in 2 years of sobriety and 3 years of living alone. "You don't have to respond right now," Bob said quietly, "or at all, if you don't want to. She's going to keep texting, probably. She thinks you're manipulating me." Bob considered this. "Am I?" Tyler looked surprised by the question. "Are you?" "I don't think so, but I'm not exactly objective here." Bob leaned back in his chair. "Tyler, I want you to know something. If living here starts to feel wrong, if you decide you want to go back home and work things out with your mother, I won't take it personally. This has to be your choice, not mine." Tyler's phone buzzed again. Another message from Patricia. He glanced at it, then turned the phone face down on the table. "It is my choice, Dad. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm making my own choice." The sound of children playing in the apartment complex's small pool drifted through the window. Bob had lived here for 3 years and had never really noticed those sounds before. Now, with Tyler here, the place felt less like exile and more like home. "There is one thing we need to talk about," Tyler said, his tone shifting. "What's that?" "Money. I know you're on a fixed income, and I don't want my being here to cause you financial stress." Bob appreciated his son's directness. It was a conversation they needed to have. "I get Social Security and a small pension from the company. It covers my rent, utilities, food, and a little extra. Having you here will definitely stretch things, but we'll manage." "What if I can't find a job right away?" "Then we eat a lot of ramen and split the air conditioning bill," Bob said with a grin. "Tyler, I survived Vietnam, a 25-year marriage, and Patricia's divorce lawyer. I think I can handle being broke for a few months if it means having my son back." Tyler laughed, the first real laugh Bob had heard from him since he'd walked through the door with that suitcase. "Okay, Dad, we'll figure it out together." As they cleared the breakfast dishes, Bob realized something had shifted. For 3 years, he'd been surviving. Now, for the first time, he felt like he might actually be living again. 2 weeks into their new living arrangement, Tyler had fallen into a rhythm that surprised both of them. Mornings were spent job hunting and attending his summer classes. Afternoons often found him helping Bob with small maintenance projects around the apartment complex, work that the landlord appreciated and occasionally paid them for in cash. Today, Tyler was returning from his 3rd interview at various retail establishments around Tucson, and Bob could see from his expression as he walked through the door that it hadn't gone well. "Let me guess," Bob said, looking up from his crossword puzzle. "They want someone with more availability?" Tyler kicked off his shoes and collapsed onto the couch. "Bingo! The manager at Target basically told me that college students are unreliable employees. Never mind that I've never called out sick from a job in my life." Bob set aside his puzzle. In the 2 weeks since Tyler had arrived, he'd watched his son handle rejection after rejection with grace and determination. It reminded him of Patricia during her nursing school years, that same quiet persistence in the face of obstacles. "What about the campus bookstore position?" "They said they'd let me know by Friday." Tyler rubbed his eyes. "Dad, what if I can't find anything? My savings account has maybe $300 left, and I still need to pay for fall semester books." This was the conversation Bob had been preparing for. He'd done some math, made some decisions, and was ready to put his plan into action. "Tyler, I need to tell you something. I've been thinking about going back to work." Tyler sat up straighter. "Dad, you're 67 years old. You're supposed to be retired." "Says who? My body's still strong, my mind's still sharp, and I could use the extra income." Bob leaned forward. Mike at the hardware store has been asking me to come back part-time. Says business has picked up with all the new housing developments going in. You don't have to do that for me. I'm not doing it just for you. I'm doing it for us. Bob's voice was firm. Tyler, having you here has been the best thing to happen to me in years. I sleep better, I eat better, hell, I even laugh more. If working a few extra hours a week means you can focus on school without worrying about rent money, then it's worth it to me. Tyler was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. Mum always said you weren't reliable when it came to family responsibilities. The words stung, but Bob had learned to let Patricia's criticisms inform his actions rather than define them. Your mother wasn't wrong about a lot of things, son. I wasn't always reliable. I wasn't always present. But I'm here now, and I'm sober now, and I want to do better. Tyler's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression shifted. It's the campus bookstore. They want me to come in tomorrow morning. Bob felt a surge of pride and relief. That's great news. Yeah, it is. Tyler looked up at his father. And Dad, if you want to go back to work part-time, I think that's great too. But not because you have to, because you want to. The next morning, Bob drove Tyler to campus for his interview. The University of Arizona sprawled across central Tucson, red brick buildings baking under the August sun. Students moved between air-conditioned spaces like desert animals seeking shade. Nervous? Bob asked as they pulled into a parking spot. A little. This job would be perfect. Good hours, decent pay, and I'd be working with books instead of trying to sell people cell phones they don't need. Bob studied his son's profile. Tyler had Patricia's determined chin, but his eyes were Bob's, gray-blue and steady. You'll do fine. Just be yourself. What if being myself isn't enough? The vulnerability in Tyler's voice reminded Bob of all the bedtime fears he'd missed, all the first day of school anxieties he hadn't been there to ease. Patricia had handled those moments alone. Tyler, you walked away from everything familiar because you believed in doing the right thing. You've been living in a tiny apartment with your old man, eating cereal for dinner some nights, and you haven't complained once. You're stronger than you know. Tyler smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. Thanks, Dad. After Tyler disappeared into the bookstore, Bob drove to Henderson Hardware, the family-owned shop where he'd worked weekends during the worst financial times after his divorce. Mike Henderson, no relation despite the shared name, was a good man who'd given Bob work when he'd needed it most. Well, look what the cat dragged in, Mike called from behind the counter as Bob entered. Betty, look who's here. Betty Henderson, Mike's wife and business partner, emerged from the office with a smile. Bob, we were just talking about you. Mike, tell him about the manager position. Manager position? Bob raised an eyebrow. Mike nodded enthusiastically. Our day manager, Steve, is moving to Phoenix next month. We need someone with experience, someone reliable. 25 hours a week, benefits, and better pay than what we were offering for weekend shifts. Bob felt something shift inside him. This wasn't charity or desperation employment. This was opportunity. What kind of responsibilities? Opening the store, managing inventory, supervising the part-timers, handling special orders. Nothing you haven't done before. Mike's expression grew serious. Bob, I'll be straight with you. We need someone who can be here consistently, someone our customers trust. Steve's been great, but he's young and wasn't really invested in the business long term. Can I think about it? Take all the time you need, but I hope you'll say yes. This place hasn't been the same without you around regular-like. As Bob drove back to campus to pick up Tyler, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Professional confidence. He wasn't just a retiree killing time with odd jobs. He was still a valuable employee, someone with skills and experience that mattered. Tyler was waiting by the student union, his interview clearly over. Bob could tell immediately from his posture that it had gone well. So, Bob asked as Tyler climbed into the passenger seat. I start Monday, 15 hours a week, $10.50 an hour, and employee discount on textbooks. Outstanding. Congratulations, son. Thanks, Dad. How was your visit with Mike? As they drove through Tucson's afternoon heat, Bob told Tyler about the manager position. Tyler listened with growing excitement. Dad, that sounds perfect for you. Why are you hesitating? I guess I'm worried about changing too much too fast. 3 weeks ago, I was living alone, puttering around, going to my meetings, living a very small life. Now I have you here. I'm considering a new job. It's a lot. Tyler was quiet as they stopped at a red light. The heat shimmered off the asphalt, making the intersection look like it was underwater. Dad, can I tell you something Mom used to say about you? Bob tensed. Patricia's observations about his character were generally accurate and painful. She used to say that when you decided to do something, really decided, not just talked about it, you were the most determined person she'd ever met. She said, that's how you quit smoking, how you got promoted at your old job, how you survived Vietnam. The light turned green and Bob accelerated slowly. She also said that your problem wasn't that you couldn't change. It was that you were afraid to try because you were afraid of failing. Bob pulled into their apartment complex parking lot and turned off the engine. The Arizona sun had turned his small sedan into an oven, but neither of them moved to get out. What do you think? Bob asked. I think you should take the job, Dad. I think we should both take our jobs and see what happens when we stop being afraid of things getting better. That evening, as they celebrated with takeout Chinese food from their favorite place on Speedway, Bob called Mike and accepted the position. Tyler raised his fortune cookie in a toast. To new beginnings, Tyler said. To family, Bob replied. When they opened their fortune cookies, Tyler laughed out loud at his message. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. Bob's fortune was simpler. Home is where the heart is. He tucked the small paper into his wallet next to his 2-year sobriety chip and realized that for the first time in a very long time, he felt genuinely hopeful about the future. 6 weeks after Tyler's unexpected arrival, their small apartment had transformed into something that actually felt like home. Tyler's textbooks shared shelf space with Bob's paperback westerns, and the refrigerator was covered with work schedules, AA meeting reminders, and a photo Tyler had found of the two of them from a fishing trip 10 years ago. Bob was discovering that working alongside his son, even in their separate jobs, created a rhythm he hadn't expected. They carpooled to campus most days, Bob dropping Tyler at the bookstore before heading to Henderson Hardware. Their evening conversations had evolved from careful small talk to real discussions about everything, from Tyler's business classes to Bob's growing confidence as day manager. But Patricia's silence was becoming deafening. Tyler's phone no longer buzzed with angry texts. There were no voicemails, no attempts to reach out through mutual friends or family members. It was as if she had simply written both of them out of her life. It's been 3 days since she tried to contact me, Tyler said one Thursday evening as they prepared dinner together. Bob was teaching him to make his grandmother's meatloaf recipe, something he'd never bothered to share during Tyler's childhood. How does that make you feel? Bob asked, measuring out breadcrumbs. Tyler considered the question while chopping onions. Relieved mostly, but also worried. This isn't like her. Mum's never been the silent treatment type. She's more of a call you 17 times until you answer type. Bob knew Patricia well enough to understand Tyler's concern. In 25 years of marriage, her anger had always been vocal, immediate, and exhausting. This quiet withdrawal was something new and probably not good. Maybe she's processing, Bob offered, coming to terms with your decision. Or maybe she's talking to her lawyer about forcing me to move out of here. The possibility had occurred to Bob too. Patricia's legal position wasn't entirely without merit. The apartment lease was in his name, but the alimony payments that made it possible did technically involve marital assets. If she wanted to make trouble, she probably could. Tyler, if it comes to that, it won't, Tyler interrupted, but his voice lacked conviction. And even if it does, I'm 22 years old. She can't actually make me live anywhere. Bob's phone rang, interrupting their conversation. The caller ID showed Mike Henderson's number. Bob, sorry to bother you at home, but I wanted to run something by you, Mike said. We just got a call from the new housing development out on the east side. They're looking for a hardware supplier for their model homes and sales office. It's a big contract, potentially very lucrative. That sounds great, Mike. What do you need from me? Well, they want to meet tomorrow afternoon to discuss details. I was hoping you could handle it. You know our inventory better than anyone, and you're better with the business side of things than I am. Bob felt a familiar surge of professional pride. 6 weeks ago, he'd been a part-time weekend employee. Now, Mike was trusting him with major business decisions. I'd be happy to handle it. Excellent. The meeting's at 2 o'clock. I'll email you the details. After Bob hung up, Tyler looked at him with obvious admiration. Dad, that's huge. Mike really trusts you. It feels good, Bob admitted. I forgot what it was like to feel professionally useful. They finished preparing dinner in comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts. As they sat down to eat, Tyler's phone rang. The caller ID showed Patricia's name. Tyler stared at the phone for several rings before answering. "Hi, Mom?" Bob could hear Patricia's voice through the speaker, though not her specific words. Her tone was controlled, formal, not the angry volume Tyler had described from their previous conversations. "I'm fine, Mom. Yes, I'm still staying with Dad." More controlled, speaking from Patricia. "No, I haven't reconsidered. This is where I need to be right now." Patricia's voice rose slightly, becoming more audible. Bob caught the words manipulation and mistake. Tyler's jaw tightened. "Mom, I'm not being manipulated. I'm making my own choices." A longer speech from Patricia, during which Tyler's expression grew increasingly pained. "Mom, can we please not do this over the phone? If you want to talk, really talk, then let's meet somewhere and have an actual conversation." More speaking from Patricia. Then Tyler looked genuinely surprised. "You want to meet with both of us? Dad too?" Bob's stomach clenched. The idea of facing Patricia again, especially in the context of their current situation, was intimidating. But Tyler was looking at him with a question in his eyes. Bob nodded. "Okay, Mom. When and where?" After Tyler hung up, they sat in silence for several minutes. "She wants to meet Saturday morning at the IHOP on Campbell," Tyler finally said. "Neutral territory, she called it." How did she sound? Different. Calmer, maybe, but also, I don't know, sad. Bob felt a complex mix of emotions. Guilt, certainly. He'd never wanted to be the cause of Patricia losing her relationship with Tyler. But also, wariness. Patricia was intelligent and strategic. This sudden desire for a meeting could be genuine reconciliation, or it could be something else entirely. "Tyler, you know that whatever happens at this meeting, whatever your mother says or asks for, you don't have to choose sides, right? You're not responsible for fixing the relationship between your parents." Tyler looked at his father with eyes that seemed older than his 22 years. "Dad, I stopped choosing sides the day I walked in here with my suitcase. I chose my own side." Friday's business meeting went better than Bob had dared hope. The housing development representatives were impressed with Henderson Hardware's inventory and competitive pricing. By the end of the meeting, Bob had secured a contract worth more than $50,000 over the next year. Mike was ecstatic. "Bob, this is the biggest deal we've landed in 5 years. How does a raise sound, and maybe some commission on future big contracts?" Driving home, Bob felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Unqualified success. He was good at his job, valued by his employer, and financially secure for the first time since the divorce. Even more importantly, he had something to offer Tyler beyond just a place to sleep. That evening, as they prepared for the next day's meeting with Patricia, Bob made a decision. "Tyler, whatever your mother wants to discuss tomorrow, I want you to know something. These past 6 weeks have been the best I've felt in years. You've given me my son back. But more than that, you've given me a reason to be the man I want to be." Tyler smiled. "Dad, you've been that man all along. I just gave you a chance to show it." As they went to bed, Tyler on his air mattress, Bob in his bedroom, both were thinking about the morning ahead. Neither knew what Patricia wanted, but for the first time since Tyler had arrived with his suitcase, they felt ready to face whatever came next together. Outside, Tucson's desert night was clear and cool, stars visible despite the city lights. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight father and son slept peacefully under the same roof, both feeling like they had found their way home. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of brutal August heat that made Tucson residents move from air-conditioned car to air-conditioned building as quickly as possible. Bob and Tyler arrived at the IHOP on Campbell Road 15 minutes early, both nervous but determined to present a united front. Patricia was already there, seated in a corner booth with a clear view of the entrance. At 58, she was still an attractive woman, her auburn hair now showing streaks of silver, her green eyes as sharp as ever. She wore a simple blue dress that Tyler recognized from church functions, and her hands were folded calmly on the table. She looked tired, Bob realized as they approached. Not just physically tired, but emotionally exhausted in a way that reminded him of the final months of their marriage. "Mom," Tyler said, sliding into the booth across from her. Patricia, Bob said, taking the seat next to his son. Thank you both for coming, Patricia said. Her voice was steady, controlled, but lacking the edge Bob had expected. I ordered coffee for everyone. I hope that's okay. The waitress appeared with a pot of coffee and menus, providing a brief distraction while they settled in. Bob noticed that Patricia's hands trembled slightly as she lifted her cup, a detail that reminded him she was nervous too. Tyler, you look good, Patricia said. Are you eating enough? Tyler smiled slightly. Dad's been teaching me to cook. We made Grandma Henderson's meatloaf recipe last week. Patricia's eyebrows rose slightly. I haven't had that in years. I'd forgotten Bob knew how to make it. The mention of Bob's late mother seemed to soften something in Patricia's expression. She genuinely liked Bob's mother, and the feeling had been mutual. Mom, why did you want to meet with both of us? Tyler asked gently. Patricia took a sip of coffee, gathering her thoughts. Because I've spent the last 6 weeks being angry, and I'm tired of being angry. Because I've lost my son, and I miss him. And because I think I owe your father an apology. Bob nearly choked on his coffee. In 25 years of marriage and 3 years of divorce aftermath, Patricia had never once apologized to him about anything. Patricia, you don't owe me. Yes, I do. Her voice was firm. Bob, when Tyler left, I blamed you. I convinced myself that you were manipulating him, using him to get back at me. But I've had time to think, and I realize I was wrong. She turned to Tyler. Honey, your father isn't manipulating you. If anything, I was trying to manipulate you by making you choose between us. Tyler reached across the table and took his mother's hand. Mom, I never wanted to hurt you. I know that. And I know that what I did, giving you that ultimatum, was unfair and cruel. Patricia's voice wavered slightly. I was so angry at your father, so hurt by everything that happened between us, that I couldn't separate that from your relationship with him. Bob felt something tight in his chest begin to loosen. Patricia, we were both hurt. We both made mistakes. Yes, but my mistakes affected our son, and for that, I'm sorry. She looked directly at Bob for the first time since they'd sat down. Bob, Tyler told me you've been sober for 2 years. Yes. And you're working again? Full-time, actually. I was just promoted to day manager at Henderson Hardware. Patricia's expression showed genuine surprise and perhaps a hint of pride. That's wonderful, Bob. I'm glad you're doing well. The waitress returned to take their order. Tyler asked for pancakes, Bob ordered eggs and bacon, and Patricia requested just toast. As they waited for their food, the conversation turned to safer topics. Tyler's classes, his job at the bookstore, the relentless Arizona heat. But Bob could sense that Patricia had more to say. She kept glancing between him and Tyler, as if working up the courage to broach a difficult subject. Finally, as their food arrived, Patricia took a deep breath. I want Tyler to come home, she said quietly, but not the way I wanted it before. Tyler paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. What do you mean? I want you to come home because you want to, not because I'm forcing you to choose. And I want you to maintain your relationship with your father. Bob felt cautiously optimistic. This wasn't the Patricia he remembered from their divorce proceedings, demanding, uncompromising, determined to win at all costs. There are some conditions, Patricia continued, and Bob's optimism dimmed slightly. There were always conditions with Patricia. Mom, Tyler started. Let me finish, please. The conditions aren't for you, Tyler. They're for me. Patricia looked directly at Bob. Bob, I need to know that if Tyler comes home, you won't disappear from his life again. I need to know that this isn't just a temporary arrangement until you get bored or overwhelmed. The directness of the challenge caught Bob off guard, but he realized it was fair. His track record as a father, especially during Tyler's teenage years, wasn't stellar. Patricia, I can't promise I'll be perfect, but I can promise that I'm not going anywhere. Having Tyler in my life these past 6 weeks has been the best thing that's happened to me in years. I'm not giving that up. Tyler looked between his parents, clearly torn. What if I don't want to choose? What if I want to split my time between both of you? Patricia considered this. That would be complicated, but not impossible. I have an idea, Bob said slowly. Tyler, what if you moved back home with your mother during the school year, but spent weekends and holidays with me? You'd be closer to campus, and your mother would have you back, but we could still maintain our relationship. Tyler's face lit up. That could work. "Mum, what do you think?" Patricia was quiet for a long moment, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "I think it sounds reasonable. But Bob, I need one more thing from you." "What's that?" "I need you to forgive me. For the ultimatum, for trying to turn Tyler against you, for all the years I spent being so angry that I couldn't see you were genuinely trying to change." Bob felt tears prick his eyes. This was the Patricia he'd fallen in love with 30 years ago. Honest, vulnerable, capable of admitting when she was wrong. "Patricia, there's nothing to forgive. We were both doing the best we could with a bad situation." "No, there is something to forgive," she insisted. "Bob, when you got sober, when you started turning your life around, I should have been supportive. Instead, I was suspicious. I kept waiting for you to fail because it was easier than hoping you'd succeed." Tyler reached for both of his parents' hands across the table. "Mom, Dad, maybe we all need to forgive each other, and maybe we need to forgive ourselves too." For the first time in 3 years, Bob looked at his ex-wife without anger, without defensiveness, without the weight of old resentments. He saw a woman who had carried the burden of their family alone for too many years, who had protected their son from his worst tendencies, who had every right to be cautious about trusting him again. "Patricia, I forgive you for all of it, and I hope you can forgive me too." Patricia's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she squeezed both their hands. "I do forgive you, Bob. I should have done it years ago." The IHOP breakfast crowd buzzed around them, oblivious to the small miracle happening in the corner booth. A family that had been broken for 3 years was slowly, carefully, putting itself back together, not in the same configuration as before, but in a new arrangement that might actually work. "So," Tyler said, his voice slightly hoarse with emotion, "when would this new arrangement start?" Patricia wiped her eyes with her napkin. "Whenever you're ready. Your room is exactly as you left it." Tyler looked at Bob. "Dad, are you okay with this?" Bob smiled, feeling lighter than he had in years. "Tyler, I want what's best for you. If that means spending weekends together instead of every day, I'll take it. Besides," he added with a grin, "it'll give me time to miss you properly." "And Bob," Patricia said, "you're welcome for dinner on Sundays if you'd like." The offer hung in the air between them. Sunday dinners had been a family tradition during the good years of their marriage. The idea of recreating that, even in this new context, felt both terrifying and wonderful. "I'd like that very much," Bob said. As they finished their breakfast, they worked out the practical details. Tyler would move back home the following weekend, but would spend Saturday nights at Bob's apartment. Sunday dinners would rotate between Patricia's house and local restaurants. Bob would be included in major family decisions and celebrations. Most importantly, they would all commit to honest communication. No more ultimatums, no more silent treatments, no more forcing Tyler to choose sides in conflicts that weren't his to resolve. When they left the restaurant, Patricia surprised Bob by giving him a brief hug. "Thank you," she whispered, "for taking care of him when I couldn't. Thank you for raising him to be the kind of man who'd walk away from everything familiar because he believed it was right," Bob replied. Tyler watched his parents with amazement. 6 weeks ago, he'd been forced to choose between them. Now he didn't have to choose at all. The drive back to the apartment was quiet, both men processing what had just happened. As they pulled into the parking lot, Tyler turned to his father. "Dad, are you really okay with this? I know how much you've enjoyed having me around." Bob considered the question seriously. The apartment would feel empty again, and he'd miss the daily conversations, the shared meals, the sense of purpose that came with taking care of someone else. But he'd also gained something more valuable than Tyler's constant presence, the knowledge that his son wanted him in his life, and the certainty that their relationship could survive whatever challenges came next. "Tyler, 6 weeks ago, you walked through that door and gave me the best gift I've ever received, a second chance to be your father. I'm not losing that just because you're moving back home. I'm just getting to share it with your mother instead of keeping it all to myself." Tyler smiled. "When did you get so wise?" "Probably around the time I realized that being your father was more important than being right about your mother." That evening, as they packed Tyler's belongings back into the same suitcase he'd arrived with, Bob reflected on how much had changed. Tyler was no longer the confused, hurt young man who'd shown up at dawn 6 weeks ago. He was confident, employed, clear about his priorities, and unafraid to advocate for what he needed. And Bob was no longer the isolated, self-pitying retiree who'd answered the door that morning. He was a working man again, a father again, and for the first time in years, he was looking forward to the future instead of just surviving the present. "Dad," Tyler said as he zipped up his suitcase, "this isn't goodbye, you know." "I know, son. It's just see you later. See you Saturday? I'll pick you up at 10. We can grab breakfast and maybe catch the Diamondbacks game if you want." "I'd like that." As Tyler loaded his suitcase into Bob's car for the drive to Patricia's house, both men felt the weight of change and the lightness of hope. The family was still broken, but it was broken in a way that allowed love to flow between the pieces. 3 hours later, Bob sat in his quiet apartment, eating a simple dinner and reading the sports page. The silence that had once felt like peace now felt a bit lonely, but it wasn't the desperate loneliness of 3 years ago. It was the gentle quiet of a man who knew he was loved, who had work that fulfilled him, who had plans for the weekend and reasons to look forward to tomorrow. His phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Made it home safe. Mom made my favorite dinner. See you Saturday. Love you, Dad." Bob smiled as he typed back, "Love you too, son. Sweet dreams." Outside, Tucson's desert evening was settling in, the temperature finally dropping below 100 degrees. Bob opened his windows to let in the night air, something he'd never bothered to do when he lived alone. For the first time in years, Bob Henderson felt like he was exactly where he belonged, in his own life, connected to the people who mattered most, ready for whatever came next. The apartment was quiet, but it wasn't empty. It was full of possibility. The Sunday dinner table at Patricia's house buzzed with comfortable conversation. Tyler was home for spring break. Bob had brought dessert from the bakery near his apartment, and Patricia was telling them about her latest nursing school volunteer work. It wasn't the family they used to be, but it was the family they'd become. Imperfect, carefully constructed, and surprisingly resilient. Tyler's grades were excellent. His relationship with both parents was stronger than it had ever been, and he'd been accepted for a summer internship with a local business management firm. Bob had been promoted again at Henderson Hardware and was considering Mike's offer to become a minority partner in the business. His apartment was still small, but he'd redecorated with Tyler's help, and it felt like home rather than exile. Patricia had started dating a fellow nurse, a kind, steady man who made her laugh and who treated Tyler with genuine warmth and respect. She seemed lighter somehow, as if letting go of old anger had freed up space for new happiness. "Dad," Tyler said as they cleared the dinner dishes, "I have some news." "Good news or bad news?" Bob asked. "Good news. Great news, actually." Tyler grinned. "I've been thinking about next year, about where I want to live during my senior year." Patricia and Bob both waited, curious. "I want to get my own place, a small apartment near campus. Nothing fancy, but something that's mine." Bob felt a moment of panic. Was Tyler pulling away from both of them? "But," Tyler continued, "I want Sunday dinners to continue, and I want to keep my Saturday morning breakfast with Dad. And Mom, I want you to help me pick out furniture." Patricia smiled. "That sounds perfect, honey." Bob nodded, realizing that Tyler's desire for independence wasn't rejection, it was confidence. Confidence that his relationships with both parents were secure enough to survive his growing up. "There's one more thing," Tyler said. "I want to host Thanksgiving this year in my new place, for all of us." Bob looked at Patricia, and she looked back at him. The idea of spending a holiday together, all three of them, would have been unthinkable a year ago. "I think that sounds wonderful," Patricia said. "Me too," Bob agreed. As Bob drove home that evening, he thought about the young man who'd walked into his apartment with a suitcase 8 months ago. Tyler had been looking for a place to land, but he'd given Bob something much more valuable, a reason to become the man he'd always wanted to be. The apartment building's parking lot was quiet, most residents already inside enjoying their Sunday evening routines. Bob pulled into his spot and sat for a moment, windows down, listening to the desert night sounds. His phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Thanks for dinner, Dad. Love our Sundays." And another from Patricia. "Thank you for the dessert. See you next week." Bob smiled as he headed inside. Tomorrow he'd go to work, where Mike would probably have 3 new projects and 2 impossible requests. Tuesday was his AA meeting, where he'd celebrate 2.5 years of sobriety. Wednesday, Tyler had a business presentation he wanted to practice in front of an audience, and Bob had volunteered to listen. Friday, he was taking Patricia out for coffee to discuss Tyler's graduation plans. It was a full life. a good life, built one careful day at a time. As Bob settled into his recliner with a cup of tea and a Louis L'Amour novel, he reflected on how sometimes the best things come from the worst circumstances. Tyler's arrival with that suitcase had been born from family conflict and pain, but it had led to healing, growth, and a new understanding of what family could be. Outside his window, Tucson stretched out under a canopy of desert stars, vast and beautiful and full of possibility. Bob fell asleep in his chair, the book open in his lap, dreaming of Saturday morning breakfasts and Sunday family dinners and all the ordinary moments that make a life worth living. In the end, home wasn't a place or a legal document or a custody arrangement. Home was showing up consistently and lovingly for the people who mattered most. Home was forgiveness, second chances, and the courage to build something new from the pieces of something broken. Home was where the heart chose to be.